Well, moving over to Netflix, I'm going to talk about All Day and a Night, which is written and directed by Joe Robert Cole, who, if anyone recognizes his name, he's actually the co-writer of Black Panther. So this movie tells the story of Jakor, a young black man living in the hoods of L.A. It's what I think is L.A. They never outright say where it takes place, but it looks enough like L.A. for me to believe that it is. It tells the story of Jakor, who has just been sentenced to prison. While locked up, he begins to think about his life, his childhood, and basically the days leading up to his arrest. His character is faced with many obstacles inside and outside of prison. He grew up in a poor and broken household. He has a baby on the way, and because of the crime that he committed to land up in jail, he suddenly has a target on his back. Like, everybody's trying to take him out while he's locked up. And actually, while he's locked up, he's also in the same prison that his father is currently locked up in. A father who is, by all means, not a good one. Definitely on the wrong side of the spectrum when it comes to being a good dad. So this movie was a bit of a mixed bag for me. I told you this before the podcast. I'll talk about the pros first, which is the acting. I think the acting is actually really, really good, especially coming from Ashton Sanders, who, if anyone recognizes him, he's from Moonlight. He played, I think his name was Trey, right? The main character.
The main character, yeah.
Yeah, so he plays the high school version of him, and he's just as good as he was in Moonlight. He's, especially in this movie, if we're talking Moonlight, he's, a good student. He's living in a rough area. His mom's on drugs, but he seems like he's at least a stand-up guy. Whereas this character, Jakor, he's very much I would say a product of his environment. He grew up basically around violence, so in a way, that's all he knew. And while he actually was friends with somebody who was like, "I'm getting out of the hood. Like, I'm not growing up here. I'm gonna find my way out." Who I'll talk about later, he got wound up in the drama and then the gangbanging, basically. And you see the internal struggle of, like, knowing that, like, he doesn't want to do this for the rest of his life, but also it's just kind of the only thing he knows, because that's hell, it was in his house. His father, played by Jeffrey Wright, his character's name is JD. He was strung out on drugs, awful, always screaming with his mom, or with his wife. Actually, I don't even know if they're married, but, just always arguing and always getting himself into trouble, and eventually ended up locked up and not being able to raise his son anymore. And you really just see the struggle around him, and it really, really sucks. I also want to shout out Kelly Jenrette, who played the character of Delonda, who is Jakor's mother, who... She's really not in the movie that much. If I am really thinking, she's probably in it for about 4 to 5 scenes. And this is a 2-hour-long movie. But for every moment that she's on screen, I was so drawn to her as a character, but her as an actress as well. She really kills it, and she really feels like... She feels real. She feels like a real mother caught up in the situation. But this movie also stars a big star, Yahya Abdul-Mateen, who, we know from... the Get Down, and he's in line to play Candyman, or this version of Candyman, Jordan Peele's version. He plays a character named Big Stunna, who also isn't in the movie that much, but when he's there, he's just a force to be reckoned with. You see his presence, and he's the big man in the area, and I really enjoyed whenever he was showing up. As for the other good things, this movie, the cinematography is great. There honestly isn't a bad moment. At first, I thought the movie was too dark. There's an opening scene that takes place where it's a very long, beautiful tracking shot. I'm sure it's multiple takes, but I thought the movie was too dark at first. But then I kind of realized that's the point. You're supposed to see how this kid is hidden as he's jumping around through different yards and hiding throughout the neighborhood in order to commit the crime that he's about to commit. And I gotta give my props to the cinematographer. They really sold that well. It looks gorgeous. LA looks great. If it is LA, like I said, I don't know, but if it is LA looks amazing. And also, there's another great tracking shot with this I guess block party that's going on for Big Stunna, and it just travels along. It's Jakor, his girlfriend, and his friend TQ, played by Isaiah John, and they're just like walking through, and you're seeing all the surroundings of this hood and how everybody's partying and having a good time, and it really made me wish that Corona was not a thing, because I miss social interaction. But I loved the look of it and everything. It really felt, it felt like yeah, I guess, it felt in a way like my childhood, where when I used to grow up and like hang out in like my grandma's house or like my uncle's house in Philly. It really it felt close to home for me. Of course, it ends up in tragedy, or at least it ends up, turning into a bloody situation at the party. But yeah, it felt like my past, if I'm saying that. I think the other thing that this movie does really well is that while it does clearly wear its inspirations on its sleeve, you can definitely see signs of Boys in the Hood or Menace to Society on it, or within it. It never feels like it's just copying. Like, even that party scene, it reminded me of a scene in Boys in the Hood where there's a confrontation between Doughboy, Ice Cube's character, and another rival gang, and how that ends up in a shootout. But they put their own style on it, so it doesn't feel like it's just a copycat. I think this movie also does really well at painting the hood mentality, which I talked about previously with Chakor, of how, when all is violence and gang violence, or just robbing people, things like that, and your father does it, or like your friends do it, and you're at a point where you want to do anything else, but society kind of won't let you. You can apply for multiple jobs or anything, and they just kind of tell you no. So you feel like that's the only thing you could do to provide for your family, or even just yourself, to make it through the next day. They paint a really stark but like realistic picture around that, and I've talked to many people who have felt like that, where they couldn't get out and this is all they could do in life. And I think this movie shows that, in a way, while that could be around you, it doesn't necessarily have to be your only path in life. It's just hard to get out of it. Especially with, going into the character of Lamarck. All he said was his friend growing up, who said to himself that he didn't want to grow up in the hood anymore, that he wanted to get out. He ends up joining the army, and it cost him his legs. At some point, they don't really go into how exactly happens, but he ends up getting shot in the back, and I guess getting a spinal injury, and he can't walk. And while he doesn't seem, he's obviously not happy about it, he at least was able to get out in some way. And it's just kind of that harsh reality of like, wow, the only way to get out of the hood sometimes for some people is you have to sacrifice your body for it, and that's a tragedy of it all of itself. If there's anything about this movie that kind of threw me off, though, I think it is its story structure. You talked about previously in the True History of the Kelly Gang that it goes from childhood to, I guess, teenager to adulthood before he's hung. And this movie has a similar approach. It starts off with Chakor as an adult, or let's call him an adult. He's definitely in his 20s. As an adult, and then it goes back to tell his past as a child, and then goes back to when he's adult. We're a few months before he ends up in jail, but then it just kind of keeps going around the timeline a lot. So like, it'll start out at one point he's an adult, and then it'll jump to him in jail, and they'll jump to him as a kid, and then it'll just go sporadically throughout the movie at various points. And by the end of the movie, you kind of understand why they're doing it. They're leading to a reveal that I will say is a very clever reveal. I didn't see it coming, but I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. That makes the context of the beginning of the movie connect. But it still feels disjointed. I still found it really distracting and threw off the overall movie for me. And it was really, really hard to, I guess, connect the dots in certain areas. I also, speaking clearly, like, while I loved Ashton Sanders' performance, I found the character of Chakor to be awful at times. There are moments where he's a very likable kid, especially as a young child. Like, obviously you're not going to hate a kid who's not doing anything wrong. But, as he grows up and he tries to straighten himself out because he finds out he has a son on the way, and he gets a job and this, that, and the other. And, while he's not necessarily on the wrong path, he's still making a few mistakes here and there. There are just certain moments where they'll just make him do something despicable. And you're like, dude, Jesus Christ, like, you're the main character. I'm supposed to like you. And actually, that's not true. You don't have to like your main character. So you can make a main character who's a scumbag. But, I don't know, there were a lot of times throughout this movie where I just found him to be unbearable, like, as a human being, and I was like, dude, Jesus Christ. And by the end of the movie, he somewhat turns himself around and chooses a better path, a fatherly path. He decides to, connect more with his son, while behind bars. And while that does make him feel better, there are a lot of choices that he makes in the past that just makes him the worst. And it took a lot for me to finally be on his side in a way. I guess besides the hood politics of this movie, the core element is the father and son relationship between Jakor and JD, and or at least I feel like that's what the movie was trying to have it be, and they really don't sell that as well as they should have. It's even on the poster how it has Jakor's face and then his father's face, and how it's like you becoming your dad and making the same mistakes as your dad, and how his dad even comes out and says multiple times that I don't want you to be me. But granted, he's like drunk when he's saying it, and making him witness things that no child should ever witness. Hell, the moment we meet his dad, he's hitting his son because his son got robbed at school, and he's like, "Don't ever let anybody like rob you." And it's like, bro, that's not how you. That's not how you parent. That's not how you handle that. And his father tries to initiate a relationship with him while in jail. Like I said, they're locked up in the same prison. And at first, like he's very standoffish about it, but it's the overall character arc of like, okay, well I'll listen to my dad's advice because he is telling some truths. Obviously, he's been locked up for years. He's graying now. He doesn't have cornrows anymore. At this point, he's like, look, we're both stuck here, but I'm at least gonna make sure you make it out alive, like as long as I can to help you out. And I don't know, like they don't spend enough time on it. It feels like it's like peppered in every once in a while, and I felt like if they had structured the story a little bit better and focused a lot more time of like him in prison as like its own central thing, then I feel like I would have found it a bit more. It would have sold me a bit more. But for me, it just felt a little, like I said, disjointed. So yeah, no, I think there's a lot of promise in this movie. I think there's a lot of good in this movie. I just think that the script and maybe the editing choices could have been reworked a bit. It is gorgeous to look at movie. I think all the actors are great. They do like phenomenal work. I think the cinematography is really good. I just think that the script needed a little bit of work. So that being said, I'll give it a 2.5 out of 5. I did enjoy it. I think it's not the worst thing you can watch on Netflix right now, but I think I was expecting a little bit more.